Hey guys, I want to talk a little bit today about Tier 3 for Warriors and the bonuses, specifically the two-piece Tier 3 bonus. I've done videos in the past talking about different gear sets that I use and different combinations of gear and whatnot. And during these videos, or the reason I'm making these videos is I started making them initially to help other people in my guild, up and coming tanks. Um, you know, I haven't been tanking Nax for 3 or 4 years like some other folks out there, but I learned from other warriors who have been playing Classic since it released, and also have been playing Warrior on private servers. Um, so I learned a lot from those guys. I've been tanking Nax. I've been playing Classic era as a warrior for a little less than a year. So I've learned a lot in that year, and I'm trying to help pass that knowledge on because a lot of these guys don't have Twitch accounts. A lot of these guys don't have YouTube channels. They don't stream. They just play the game and then for fun, and then they go do something else. And nowadays, it's not that difficult to set up a Twitch account. Like, everything's free. I have a free Twitch account. I have a free DaVinci Resolve video editing software, which I don't even really use that much. And YouTube account is free. So I can make these videos, post them, and then have other folks in my guild, and then ideally other folks in other guilds as well. Get some of their questions answered, and then get some thoughts and opinions about somebody who does tank Nax, because sometimes you see things on Discords and whatnot, and then you look up the logs of those people, and they don't even tank in Nax, but they're making commentary about it. And again, these are all my opinions. There's other opinions out there. I encourage you to take what I say with a grain of salt. Go test it yourself, because it all depends on your healers, and it depends on your DPS as well. It depends on what your goals are in Nax. If you're in Nax for 4 or 5 hours and your guild is not trying to push and be as efficient as possible, you might not need to have maximum threat. You might be fine running in 4-piece or 5-piece or 6-piece the whole time, because you prefer staying alive over threat. That's fine too. I'm not in your guild. I'm not your raid leader. But for the purposes of this discussion, I do want to talk about two-piece Tier 3. So I've mentioned this in another video, but when I put Tier 3 on as a tank, it's this. So this 4-piece set is what I usually wear on harder hitting bosses in Nax, especially if I'm not trying to parse. And I almost always am not trying to parse. There's a few times that I will. I will not usually do it. And the ironic thing is I do it outside of DMF weeks. And DMF is a nice, bump in the parse damage. But 4-piece is put on to increase your stamina. You're really not wearing it. You're increasing your overall health pool and a little bit of your mitigation. You're really not wearing it for the bonuses. The taunt bonus is nice. So your base chance to miss with taunt and challenging shout is 16%, because those are considered spells, and the spell miss rate against bosses is 16%. Obviously, it's lower for trash. That bonus is probably the best bonus out in the set. It's very good for 4 horsemen. It's very good for trash. It's really not that great on any other bosses, because a lot of them can't be taunted. So you're wearing it mostly for the stamina and a little bit of the mitigation. The 2-piece, you need to have the 2-piece in order to get to the 4-piece, but the 2-piece bonus is not. It's not a lot of threat. So in my opinion, you should never, like, if you look at my gear sets, I don't even have. So I have my threat set, which is what I wear on like the caster bosses like Noth and Hygen, and I use this on a noob sometimes, depends on what week it is. So I go straight from my threat set to my 4-piece set, and then if after 4-piece I have mitigation. this is like a Lotheb set. You know, the mitigation set is essentially Lotheb and Saffron, and you still start out dual wielding on both of those bosses for the threat. Even on Patchwork, when I'm soaking, I don't wear this mitigation set. I wear a different set because I want more threat. So my 4-piece is basically considered to be like my balanced set. So let's look at some of the math. And I went back and pulled, this is the last week, so this is September 12th. This was a Nax that we did. This is a DMF week. So, and I believe I had buffs. I believe I had my raid buffs all the way to the end. Yeah, it looks like it. Except for obviously Songi and Rend. Those are only 1 hour buffs. So this was a 1 hour and... this was a 1 hour, 28 minute run. So I had the 2 hour buffs for the full raid. So I'm going to go to damage done. And I've already pulled this information, but I'm just going to show you where I'm getting it from. Warcraft logs is, for some reason, getting slow. So I'm going to go to damage done and just filter by my name here. And these numbers are going to be a little skewed because there are times when I am wearing the 2-piece bonus and there are times where I am not wearing the 2-piece bonus because I do swap sets of gear, obviously, depending on what boss I'm tanking. And I also did not tank every single boss. But I wanted to at least show the math. Okay, so this is for the entire raid. This is trash and bosses. Now, Heroic Strike has an extra threat component. Cleave has an extra threat component. Thunder Fury and Revenge. Revenge has a huge extra threat component. So Revenge... So there's a Wowhead page that has a table on it if you scroll down, and I could put this link in the description. It has all of the threat modifiers for every class in Classic and every spell. So if you go to Warrior, Revenge rank 6. So if you read Revenge, it says you counterattack for 81 to 99 damage and a high amount of threat. The high amount of threat is this value. So your damage always creates threat, whether you're DPS, a tank, or whatever. Drinking pretty much any spell in the game. There's only a handful of spells that cause no threat. Drinking a mana potion causes threat. Drinking a health potion causes threat. Using a health stone causes threat. Casting Demo Shout causes threat. Battle Shout causes threat. Like if you scroll down, you can see it's like Demo Shout, 43 threat. And I believe that's per mob. Battle Shout, this is rank 5, 39. Rank 7, 70. And these values are not modified, so that means that this is not with a defensive stance modifier. Defensive stance, if you look up here, is 130% base threat. So you would take 355 and multiply it by 1.3. And then if you have Defiance, which is 3% extra threat per talent point, it ends up being 149.5. So you would take 3. So if we do that real quick, and I'm just doing this for people who are not familiar with this mechanic. So if you're a warrior in defensive stance, which you have to be in defensive stance to cast Revenge, and you have Defiance, then the threat from Revenge is 528.95. So basically 529. And that's just the flat threat that you get from the bonus. Now the damage, it depends on how much damage you do. So Revenge is a very narrow window of range. It's not 100 to 200 damage. You know, it's not 100 point. It's 9, or excuse me, it's almost 20 points of damage. It's pretty narrow range. So it's 81 to 99. The 2-piece bonus adds 75 to that. So let's say we just average that to be 90. So then the way you would figure out the threat for that damage would be 90. Multiply that by 1.49. So 134 threat is how much the actual damage portion is doing. on an average. That's an average hit. That's not a crit. That's just an average revenge, right? Now the 75 is the bonus, so it adds 75 damage. So you would take 75 times 1.49. So it's 111, basically 112 threat is what you're adding with the 2-piece bonus. Okay? I have that in a spreadsheet. Here's the spreadsheet. And I zoom this in so it's easier to see. And this is exactly the math I just did with the calculator. So Revenge rank 6, I'm averaging the damage to be 90. 2-piece bonus adds in 75 for the total damage. Here's the total damage without 2-piece. Here's the total damage with 2-piece. They both have the same threat value. The threat from damage, the bonus threat is the same. The end threat. So the difference is 112, which is essentially what we just did with the calculator. So this tank with the 2-piece bonus on revenge cast that revenge will on average cause 112 more threat. Now that does not take into consideration the other pieces of gear you'd be wearing instead of 2-piece. So if you're, for example, if your 2-piece set is bracers and boots, this doesn't take into account that now you're wearing different bracers and boots. Because obviously taking that 2-piece set off, you're going to probably more than likely put on Wrist Guards of Vengeance or Bracers of Brutality or something that has more threat stats on it than the tier 3 bracers, right? And the same for the boots or the ring or whatever pieces you're wearing. So for the sake of argument, let's just say, this tank is putting out 112 more threat per revenge cast, only on revenge. Okay? And again, that doesn't take into consideration the threat you lose from your other abilities if you're not wearing like chromatic boots or you're not wearing QSR for a ring, whatever. So now let's go back. So this is for the entire raid, bosses and all. I did a total of 1.6 million damage, and that includes, I was in Berserker stance and did some whirlwinds, and I, shot my bow a couple times, sapper charges, whatever. But these are all very small percentages, right? So if we look, melee, heroic strike, bloodthirst, and cleave. Revenge is way down here. So this is the damage that I caused with revenge for the whole raid. 22.5 thousand out of 1.65 million. So when you look at it percentage wise, you're really not going to move the needle with that extra 112 threat, per cast. And we'll go look at that. So I essentially I did more threat with cleave because cleave has an extra 100 threat. Let me find cleave. And usually you're not casting cleave for the threat. I'm just making a point. So cleave rank 5 has an extra 100 threat. Excuse me. Oops, let me get back down here. Okay, so back on the spreadsheet. So my total casts of revenge were 121. I already went, and I'm saying the threat difference is 112, right? Because this was the threat difference. So I was missing, essentially I left 13,500 threat on the table, which sounds like a lot. And that's 121 casts over every single boss, every single trash pull. That's the entire raid. 121 casts is all. And I macro revenge, and just to show, like, let's go to casts. Here, this is taking too long. I might have to close this and reopen it. So I'm going to go to casts, and then I'm going to go to revenge just to show I'm not sandbagging. Okay, so I cast the most revenge out of all the tanks. I did not tank every single boss, but I tanked most of them. But what I was going to say is I macro revenge and heroic strike together, so I'm constantly spamming revenge. When it comes off cooldown, unless bloodthirst is also off cooldown, I'm casting revenge. I only prioritize bloodthirst over revenge. So I'm out of 121 casts, missing that much threat equals that much. But then I did a total of 1.65 million damage. The threat from that So I'm taking that number, 1.65 million. I'm multiplying it by my threat modifier, which is 1.495. So my threat for the whole raid was almost 2.5 million. So if you take that 13,500 and divide it into your 2.5 million, that's the percentage that I left on the table, 0.5%. And again, this is not 100% accurate because again, in some of these fights I was wearing 4-piece tier 3, which does include the bonus. But when you look at it from a numbers perspective, and it doesn't also include the fights where I was wearing, like, let's go look at a noob real quick. So on a noob, I tanked him. So let's look at damage taken. I took melee from a noob recon 100%. Okay. I only cast Revenge 6 times. I'm not going to do the individual numbers for this. I mean, maybe we could just do it. But Revenge is my low. I even did more threat with Thunder Fury. Or excuse me, more damage with Thunder Fury. The proc on this fight. Cleave, Bloodthirst, melee, Heroic Strike. Let's look at what I was wearing. I was not wearing 4-piece for this. I was wearing my threat gear for this. So instead of wearing, and some people wear the bracers of tier 3 and then the ring, or the bracers and the boots or whatever. So I'm not factoring in the threat that I would lose from having these pieces of gear on. I have simmed that out before in the threat sim, and you do end up gaining more threat than the Revenge bonus, if that makes sense. So it's not a ton of threat. Like, you're really not, if you're putting on 2-piece tier 3, you probably should be doing it for the stamina and not for the bonus. And again, the bonus is like, it's a nice, you know, it's nice to have the extra little pop from Revenge, but only if you're doing that so that you can get a little more stamina. I don't think it's worth it because the amount of stamina you gain versus the threat you lose, like, it's almost kind of like a wash. You know, if you trust your healers enough to keep you up in this gear, wearing 2-piece is not really going to change the needle on your stamina either. You know, so in my opinion, you're really just that's an extra gear set to manage that, in my opinion, is not worth it. 4-piece, though, is a very solid. Now, your threat is going to obviously be lower, but you're adding a decent amount of stamina, you know, over 1,000 to your threat set. You're going to lose some threat, but, you know, for bosses that hit harder, like, you know, 4-piece is really good on, for main tanking Patchwork. It's a decent set. It's pretty good for tanking the dead side on Gothic. It's good for Maxna, depending on your DPS. If your DPS is crazy geared and you're trying to one phaser, then this is probably not what I would wear. But I see tanks all the time wearing full mitigation on Maxna, and 4-piece is usually plenty enough. You can throw on a shield at any point, you know, using a macro. You don't necessarily need to have 8 out of 8 or 9 out of 9 or whatever tier 3 to tank Maxna. She's really not even scary except for the web wrap and the enrage. And if you kill her before web wrap, you remove that from the equation, and then on her enrage you can either last stand or shield wall, or your healers, you can just prepare for it and know that it's coming. But from a math standpoint, the 2-piece tier 3 just doesn't, in my opinion, make sense. So that's all. And again, circling back to what I said in the beginning, you know, this is just my opinion. I know some great tanks that wear 2-piece. I know some tanks that wear it because they want to have a little bump in stamina, and especially if you don't have, you know, these Dreadnought bracers are 28 stamina and 14 strength, so they do have a little bit of threat. They have some attack power on them through the strength. The 5 defense is really not doing a whole lot of anything, but if you have like Risk Guard's a true flight, and that's what you're swapping out, because you want to get more stamina or whatever, that, you know, that's totally fine. But if you don't have like bracers or brutality, like these are very good threat bracers, but Risk Guards of Vengeance are best in slot. If you don't have Risk Guards of Vengeance, it's probably going to be way down the list because I had to search for it. Yeah, risk guards of vengeance. So these are only 10 stamina. They're 24 strength, which is huge, and 1% crit, which is also huge. But you're losing, 10. You're losing 20 attack power in the crit. But if you don't have these yet, and you want to wear the 2-piece, that's totally cool. But don't get sucked into the trap of thinking that revenge bonus is worth it for the threat, because it's really not. The 4-piece, like I said, is the 4-piece set that still doesn't cap you on your taunts. You're still going to have an 11% chance to miss your taunts. But the 4-piece is nice, especially in military wing where things hit really hard. There's a lot of cleave going on. It's nice to help you with your taunts in case somebody pulls aggro, or if you're, usually I taunt on the pool. I have Heroic Strike queued up, and then I'm running in and taunting on the pool. And it's nice to have that backup, that extra 5% hit. But the 2-piece bonus is, like I said, it's not making or breaking anything. So, all right, if anybody has any questions or comments, you can leave them below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.